Hey, this is Keppy with Keppy Games, and I'm coming at you with another episode in my lore video series. And today I'm going to be covering races in Aeros, in the world of Aeros. The first race I'm going to cover today is the goblins and goblin tribes. Important to note is the goblins were one of the two species that originally inhabited the land of Aeros before the coming of the Empire and the other species. There were the goblins and there were the Erosians, constantly at war, and not too long before the Empire arrived, the goblins won that war, wiping out the Erosian culture, species, just wiping them off the face of the world. These goblins were once worshippers of the demon Arkham. Arkham had kind of guided their race, improved their race to be his fighting machines. However, in their history, he had betrayed them, backstabbing them, and seeking to just dominate them. They threw him out and called him from that point the Great Betrayer, and they are no longer large fans of Arkham. However, because of these adjustments that he'd made, goblins became a growing and an improving race. Goblins would eat the corpses of fallen foes, and when they do that, they take on their respective attributes and abilities. Now, something important to know, the goblins had to both slay and eat the corpse to gain on these attributes. Now, each race that they eat from, so it has to be a sentient race, by the way, but each race that they eat from will give them different attributes, different strengths, and every sentient race is a possible race for them to eat. However, there are varying levels of success. So if they eat a human, for example, the goblin will become, eventually, eating enough humans, slaying enough humans, they will become an orc. An orc is much bigger, much tougher. They are kind of the shock troops, the main battlefront in their wars, and orcs are also the most common upgraded form of goblin in their tribes. If they were to eat and kill enough elves, they would eventually become a troll. If a troll is taller, thinner, very fast, very agile form of goblin. And then if they eat a dwarf, or eat enough dwarves, they will become ogres, which are mammoth, gigantic, huge creatures that are perfect as wrecking balls through the enemy lines. However, not a lot of them like to go for that, as they will sacrifice some of their brain power for their immense size and strength. And there's not a lot that are super keen on that, especially when it would be easier to just become an orc, become tough and strong, and still get to keep their mental stability. These goblins live in tribes. They're a martial society. They value growth and strength above all else. Killing, stabbing, fighting, all these things are normal parts of life for them, as long as it continues to grow them and strengthen them. That's their society and culture. It's not necessarily dug into them as a race so much as it is their culture in those tribes. Goblins on their own are about 5 feet tall. That's kind of their average height. They'll fluctuate a little bit within that. However, when they become an orc, their average height is closer to 6.5, maybe 7 feet tall, and then a troll will be an easy 7 foot tall. Ogres are a little bit ridiculous. They'll get to be 12 feet tall, just solid, massive muscle. But like I said, goblins are the smaller, 5 foot average. They all have a greenish hue to their skin. They all have small tusks, and they are often hated by the other races because of their warlike tendencies and because they are not the prettiest of species. The next race I wanted to cover is the humans. Now, as everyone listening to this video is more than likely a human of some kind, there's not a whole lot to cover about what a human is and what it does, but a few points on the human race within Aeros. They are the primary race of the Empire that came through the gates into Aeros, and who brought with them the elves and the dwarves as slaves. Humans are incredibly adaptable. Humans are very organized in what they do. They're strategic, and they are the main inhabitants of the country of Aeros. Elves are your typical beautiful graceful, proud of it type of race. They're taller than humans on average. They average around 6 feet tall, not a ton taller, but taller on average. And everything about them is graceful. Everything about them is not quite perfect, as they can be a prideful bunch, but physically they are the most beautiful race in the land of Aeros. They do have their own country, which lies off the shores of Aeros, the country of Faystorn, which is a collection of islands, and they are incredibly isolationist over there. They do not like other races of any kind interacting with them. They'll put up with a few traders, embassies, things like that, but they do not allow a general population of another race within their borders. Elves in Aeros, on the other hand, are a minority. There's not a ton of them there, but they're not looked down on. They are seen, well, they're beautiful. It's hard to look too far down on them. So humans tend to admire elves and their beauty. Now, there is some tension with the dwarves, because the dwarves do not value beauty and appearance at all, which tends to tick off the elves, and the elves put so much stock in it that the dwarves themselves don't end up being super happy or care for that very much. Which leads me right up into the last of the main races I wanted to cover today, which is the dwarves. The dwarves are sturdy, bearded craftsmen. They average about 4.5 feet tall. The males have huge thick beards, and all of them have very thick hair and eyebrows. They do not care so much for personal beauty. Their main focus and their admiration goes to those who have great production, those who create something beautiful, those who are great warriors, the people that do things they admire, which once again leads to heavy tensions with elves, who focus a lot more on the physical beauty aspect. Now, the dwarves do not have a real problem with humans, other than, well, being brought over as slaves originally, but humans and elves get along quite well. Humans and dwarves get along quite well. However, once again, those elves and dwarves do not share a particular fondness for each other, just because of their mindsets and their cultures. Dwarves live typically underground in gigantic fortresses. They dig deep mines, and they have no problem living underground for long periods of time. However, they do appreciate the sun, and they do need to visit the sun every so often. That covers the main 4 races. I do have other races within Aeros. There are other races that show up, other races that are, say, twisted versions of another race. However, these are the 4 main races: the goblins, humans, elves, and dwarves. There are some other playable factions and races that will be coming out in the future. However, these 4 are a consistent base for my board games, card games, and role-playing systems. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in and listening. This one's a little bit shorter, but I wanted to throw it out there so that everyone could kind of get an idea of what's happening. And let me know again in the comments what you're interested in hearing about next. Let me know what things might have been unclear, and I'd be happy to touch base with you and go over more details. Thank you for your time, and you have a good day.